With standards-based grading, a student is working towards mastery of a standard or group of standards from the beginning to the end of a school year. In order to help us monitor that student's progress towards mastery of the standards have been broken into multiple learning targets. Those learning targets are then grouped into the quarters in order to allow for several checkpoints throughout the school year to help us judge a student's progress towards mastery of that standard. In this example, there are 3 learning targets to be mastered here in the first quarter, 2 additional learning targets to be mastered in the second quarter, 2 additional learning targets to be mastered in the third, and again 2 additional learning targets to be mastered in the fourth, giving us a total of 9 learning targets, building up to the overall standard that receives a score on the report card. In the best case scenario, the student would progress through this standard by mastering each learning target along the way. In this case, if the student were to master all 3 learning targets by the end of the first quarter, on their first quarter report card, they would receive a 3 for this standard. This is because the system relies on calculation rules that say if all learning target scores are at a 3, then the standard also receives a 3. However, let's consider a student who doesn't master all 3 learning targets in the first quarter. Let's say instead this student brings 2 of the learning targets to mastery, a level 3, and 1 of the learning targets stays here at a level 1. You can now look at the calculation rules and see that of the 3 learning targets that are counting in this standard by the end of the first quarter, 2 of them are green and have received a 3. 1 of them, red, has received a 1. So 2 of the 3 are at least 2 or higher, and therefore on this standard on the report card, this student would receive a 2 at the end of the first quarter. As the student progresses through quarter 2, in this example, the student brings this learning target to a level 2, and this learning target remains at a level 1. The standard is now being scored on all 5 of these learning targets. 2 at a level 3, 2 at a level 1, and 1 at a level 2. Again, the student is at a place where at least half of the learning targets are at a 2 or higher, and therefore again on the second quarter report card the student would receive a 2. Continuing on through third quarter on this standard, the student now does not master either of the 2 new learning targets. Both learning targets are at a level 1 per the evidence entered into TeacherEase. Now the standard is being scored on all 7 learning targets at the end of the third quarter. Now we are at a place where the student no longer has at least half of the learning targets at a 2 or higher. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 learning targets at a 1. So fewer than half of the learning targets are at a 2 or higher, and on the third quarter report card, this student will receive a 1. Finally, the student progresses through the fourth quarter, and in this case, the teacher enters evidence indicating that the student has fully mastered the last 2 learning targets for this standard, bringing both of those learning targets up to a level 3. However, because the system is calculating on all 9 learning targets now at the end of the school year, it will look back at whether or not the student has mastered all 9 learning targets to determine what the ultimate score will be on the report card. In this case, because the student did not master these 5 learning targets, the student cannot earn a 3 on the report card. The student will, however, earn a 2 because you can see 5 of the 9, so at least half of the learning targets are at a 2 or higher. So in this case, the student will receive a 2 on the report card. In order for this student to receive anything other than a 1 or a 2 on the report card, the student must demonstrate mastery of all of the learning targets within that standard. What if a student may not have mastered a learning target in the first quarter, but I now know at the end of the third quarter they have mastered that learning target? If the evidence I entered at the end of the first quarter does not indicate mastery, then the system will forever assume that that learning target was not mastered. In order to get TeacherEase to look at that learning target as a 3, a teacher would need to enter new evidence for that learning target in subsequent quarters of the school year. This would not go back and change the score that's reported at the end of first quarter or second quarter on the report card. It would only affect the score on the standard in the current quarter. This is because we know that students don't always learn at the same pace, and some students will take longer to master a given learning target than others. By being able to continue to enter evidence on unmastered learning targets throughout the year, we are able to give students the flexibility to master the learning targets at their own pace and ultimately still receive a 3 at any given point throughout the year on the report card, even if they didn't receive a 3 at the end of the first or second quarter. Let's take a look at how this translates into the TeacherEase gradebook, looking specifically at the category First Grade Addition and Subtraction. First Grade Addition and Subtraction is the bold heading across the top of the section on the report card. Underneath that, we have First Grade Addition and Subtraction Standard 1. That is the standard that will receive the score on the report card. At the end of quarter 1, this student received a 2. If we expand this standard, we can see the 4 learning targets that were used to calculate the 2 that went on the report card. They mastered the first 2 learning targets, earning a 3. They did not master the third learning target, demonstrating a level 1, and the fourth learning target was also not mastered. The student demonstrated a level 2. If we expand each of the learning targets, we can see the evidence that was entered. On the first learning target, the student first earned a 1 on the first piece of evidence, and then a 3, and then a 3. Using the rule, the mode of the most recent 3 pieces of evidence, the system scored that learning target at a 3 because 2 of the most recent pieces of evidence were entered at a 3. Now let's expand the second learning target. In this case, 4 pieces of evidence were entered, but the system is only scoring on the most recent 3. If you want to see only the evidence or assignments that are being used in the calculation for each learning target, you can uncheck mark this box that says Show All Assignments up here in the top left, and it will then only show you the most recent 3 pieces of evidence under any given learning target. So you can see just the evidence that's being calculated into that learning target score. So in this case, for learning target 1AS1C, there are 3 pieces of evidence calculating into the score. They are at a level 1, a 2, and a 3. Because there is no mode, there is a tie, the system will use the most recent piece of evidence as the tiebreaker, and the student is getting a 3 on this learning target at this time. I'm going to collapse that one and open the next one. Here we have 3 pieces of evidence calculating into the score, a 1, a 3, and a 1. 2 of the most recent pieces of evidence are a 1, so the student earned a 1 on this learning target. And in this last learning target, again, 3 pieces of evidence, a 1, a 3, and a 2. no mode here, and so TeacherEase uses the most recent piece of evidence as the tiebreaker, and the student is earning a 2 on this learning target. Collapsing that learning target again, you can see the 4 learning targets that are being used to calculate the report card score on this standard. In this case, you can see that 3 out of the 4, more than half, are at a 2 or higher, so the student got a 2 on the report card. Let's carry this same learning objective into quarter 2. Now, at the end of quarter 2, the student still has a 2 on this standard, and if I expand that, you can see that there are now 5 learning targets calculating into that 2. Still, the student is at half or more of the learning targets at a 2 or higher, and that is why they got a 2 on the report card. This last learning target, 1AS1F1, is earning a 3, and even though they've mastered the new learning target, they're still getting only a 2 on their report card because these last 2 learning targets from the first quarter never came to mastery. If you expand that, you can see that all of the evidence for this learning target that has been entered into the gradebook up to this point was all entered in the first quarter. No new evidence has been entered in the second quarter, therefore the system is still calculating that learning target to be at a level 2. Carry this learning into the third quarter, and still at this time the student is earning a 2 on the report card. If you expand that, you can see that there are many more learning targets now. The newest learning targets, AS1G, 1H, 1I, and 1J, are all mastered by the student, but because these 2 learning targets from the first quarter were never mastered, the student cannot earn a 3 on the report card. We could, at this time, go in and add more evidence. So here we have a missing piece of evidence, evidence 8, which was taken here in the third quarter. And if I enter a score for this student, you can see that based on the last 3, most recent 3 pieces of evidence now, 2 of those are from the first quarter and 1 is from now, 2 of those 3 pieces of evidence are at the score of a 3, and now the student is earning a 3 on this learning target. Same thing here for the 4th learning target in this standard. You can see that there's a missing piece of evidence, and I can enter new evidence here for this learning target. However, entering 1 piece of new evidence for this learning target didn't change the student's overall score to a 3, because the most recent 3 pieces of evidence, 2 from the first quarter and 1 from now, still don't tell the system that the student has mastered this target. 2 of the most recent 3 are at a level 2, so the student is still going to earn a 2 on this learning target. I would have to enter another piece of evidence at a level 3 in order for this learning target to be bumped up to a 3, and the student to earn a 3 on this standard on the report card. Another way to look at this idea in TeacherEase would be to run a report for yourself. Under Gradebook and Reports, you can either select all of the learning targets, or in this case we're just going to select the learning targets that we have been using in our example. Then you will want to select the class or classes that you want to look at on this report, and if you choose Show Printer Friendly Page, it will put it in a table for you, and then hit Generate. Now you'll see a table with all of the students in your class or classes and each of the learning targets that you are interested in, and you can see what level the student is earning on each of those learning targets. So I can see that this student would not be able to earn a 3 on the report card because of this 1 learning target back from quarter 1 that is being calculated at a level 2. This concludes the video on TeacherEase scoring and calculations. Thanks for watching.